In the summer of 1982, American early warning satellites picked up a blinding flash of light deep inside the Soviet Union. The thermal signature was massive, a 3-kiloton explosion in the middle of the Siberian wilderness. For a terrifying few minutes, analysts at NORAD thought they were watching the start of World War III. But it wasn't a nuclear test. It wasn't a missile strike. In fact, no weapon was ever fired. The largest non-nuclear explosion in human history wasn't caused by a bomb. It was caused by a glitch, a deliberate, perfectly placed string of computer code written in America, stolen by the KGB, and planted like a ticking time bomb inside the Soviet Union's most critical infrastructure. The Cold War wasn't just fought with spies and steel. It was fought with the world's first cyber weapon. And the story of how it happened is a masterclass in psychological destruction. To understand the pipeline, you need to go back about 10 years. By the mid-1970s, the Soviet Union had a problem it couldn't solve from the inside. It was falling behind. Not in ideology, not in military numbers, in technology. American microchips were faster. American radar systems were more precise. American aerospace engineering was producing guidance systems that Soviet engineers were openly studying and quietly admitting they couldn't match. The gap was widening every year, and the Kremlin knew it. So they made a decision, a very Soviet decision. If you can't build it, take it. In 1970, the KGB established a dedicated unit inside its foreign intelligence structure, Directorate Line X. The name changed depending on who was briefing whom. The mission never did. One objective: the systematic theft of Western technology at industrial scale. This wasn't traditional espionage. Traditional espionage is one agent, one secret, one dead drop at a time. Line X was something else entirely. Think of it as the world's most aggressive corporate competitor. Except instead of R&D budgets and patent filings, they used intelligence officers, front companies, and compromised academics. Hundreds of KGB personnel across 17 countries, all running the exact same play. Find the technology, access it, copy it, bring it home. Radar blueprints from France, semiconductor designs from Silicon Valley, aerospace guidance components from Canadian defense contractors, manufacturing automation systems from West Germany. By 1980, the CIA estimated that Line X was saving the Soviet military-industrial complex somewhere between $3 and $5 billion per year in research and development costs, every single year. Let that number land. American engineers were doing the work. American taxpayers were funding the labs. And American security agencies were, for the most part, completely blind to the scale of what was walking out the door. The Soviets weren't just stealing secrets. They were stealing entire decades of progress and rebuilding their defense industry on top of it. The worst part? It was working. Soviet aerospace, Soviet submarine systems, Soviet missile guidance, all of it quietly upgraded. All of it running, at its core, on stolen American engineering. Washington had absolutely no idea how deep the rot went, until a mid-level KGB officer in Moscow made a decision that would change everything. He decided he was done keeping the secret. His name was Vladimir Vetrov. On paper, everything the Soviet system was designed to produce. KGB colonel, 2 decades of service. A man who had worked inside the most sensitive operations of the most powerful intelligence apparatus on Earth. Under the surface, he was finished. Not defecting, not running. He wasn't asking for asylum or protection or money. He wanted something much more specific. He wanted to watch the system burn. In 1981, Vetrov made contact with French intelligence through a source in Moscow. He didn't just hand over a single file, a single name, or a single operational detail. He handed over everything. What the French received and passed to the CIA was later described by analysts as one of the most significant intelligence coups of the entire Cold War. They called it the Farewell Dossier. Inside that dossier, the complete internal architecture of Line X, 4,000 secret Soviet documents, the names of 250 Line X officers operating across the Western world, their cover identities, their actual assignments, their collection targets for the next acquisition cycle, and the shopping list. A detailed catalog of exactly which Western technologies the Soviet military had already successfully stolen, and exactly which ones they were actively trying to acquire next. The CIA took the Farewell Dossier to Ronald Reagan in the spring of 1982. Reagan read it. His senior intelligence staff read it. And then, the room went very quiet. Because the truth in those documents was worse than anyone had estimated. The Soviet military wasn't just using stolen technology as a supplement. In critical sectors, radar, aerospace guidance, manufacturing automation, they were structurally dependent on it. Pull out the stolen Western engineering and significant portions of the Soviet defense complex simply stopped functioning. The obvious move wrote itself. You take the list, you arrest the spies, you roll up 250 Line X officers across 17 countries in a single coordinated operation. You destroy the network, you declare victory. It would have been the largest counterintelligence sweep in Cold War history. But a man named Gus Weiss read the same dossier and didn't see a network to arrest. He saw a pipeline. And he had a very different idea about what to put inside it. Gus Weiss was not a field officer. He wasn't a spy. He wasn't a general. He was a National Security Council staffer, an analyst, a man who spent his career thinking about systems, how they work, how they break, and what happens when they break from the inside. And the idea he brought to the Reagan administration was simple. Don't arrest the 250 officers. Don't roll up the network. Don't touch a single Line X operation. Let them keep stealing. But from this moment forward, everything they steal is going to be wrong. The concept is ancient. The Trojan horse is 3,000 years old. But what Weiss was proposing had never been attempted at this scale. This wasn't a single false document. It was a coordinated, multi-year program of deliberate, invisible sabotage, threaded through the entire Line X acquisition pipeline. Defective microchips, designed to pass every quality test, then fail silently once installed in operational systems. Corrupted blueprints, precise enough to look real, but wrong enough to waste years of Soviet engineering effort. Falsified research that would send entire departments chasing dead ends. The Soviets would keep stealing. They just wouldn't know what they were actually taking home. But the centerpiece of the operation, the one Weiss built the entire strategy around, was the pipeline. The Soviet Union had staked its economic survival on a massive natural gas pipeline being built across western Siberia. Gas flowing west to customers in Europe, hard currency flowing back to Moscow. The pipeline was the engine that was supposed to keep the Soviet economy running through the 1980s. There was one problem. They needed sophisticated automated control software to run it. Valve management, compressor systems, pressure regulation across thousands of miles of pipe, software that was beyond Soviet engineering capability. Since they couldn't acquire it legally, American export controls blocked the sale. They planned to steal it from a Canadian technology company. The CIA knew, and they let it happen. But before that software crossed any border, American intelligence altered the code. The modification was designed with brutal precision. It would pass every test the Soviets ran, every KGB technical inspection, every validation check. The software would perform flawlessly during installation, flawlessly during testing. And then, once it was deep inside the operational system, running a live pipeline, far from any easy diagnostic access, it would begin to push, slowly, incrementally, the pressure climbing past safe limits, the safety systems running on the same compromised logic, not responding. The Soviets had designed their most critical infrastructure around code they believed was genuine. They had no idea what was waiting inside it. In the summer of 1982, it stopped waiting. The explosion happened on a Tuesday. No warning, no system alarm, no time to diagnose. The pressure had climbed past every safety threshold. The automated responses that were supposed to kick in didn't. The manual overrides fed into the exact same compromised logic. And then, the pipe let go. Thomas Reed, former Secretary of the Air Force, one of the few people who knew the full story, later described what the American satellites saw as the most monumental non-nuclear explosion and fire ever seen from space. 3 kilotons of force, in the middle of uninhabited Siberian wilderness, visible from orbit. Nobody died, and the pipeline ran through empty tundra. But the economic damage was devastating. The Soviet Union's hard currency lifeline, offline, months of reconstruction, a critical piece of the infrastructure that was supposed to fund the Soviet economy through the decade, gone. But here is the part that Thomas Reed emphasized above everything else. The explosion wasn't the victory. The paranoia was. Because when Soviet engineers and KGB analysts started tearing apart the wreckage, when they finally traced the failure back to the control software, they found what was inside it. The code had been altered. And that moment, that single discovery, was more destructive than the explosion itself. Because now the question wasn't just about one pipeline. The question was, what else? Every Microchip Line X had collected over the past decade. Every radar blueprint, every aerospace guidance schematic, every manufacturing automation system, every piece of Western technology that the Soviet military-industrial complex had spent years and billions acquiring. Any of it could be poisoned. All of it was now suspect. The most aggressive and successful technology acquisition program in Cold War history had just become a liability. Every stolen component was potentially a weapon aimed back at the people who stole it. You cannot contain that kind of doubt. Once it's inside a system, inside the engineers, the planners, the procurement officers who built careers on Line X acquisitions, it spreads to everything it touches. The Soviets didn't just lose a pipeline, they lost confidence in their own intelligence apparatus. And a military-industrial complex that cannot trust its own components, cannot build, cannot plan, can advance. The Cold War ended 9 years later. The causes were many: economic collapse, political fracture, structural rot that had been building for decades. But somewhere inside that collapse, in the paralysis that gripped Soviet technology development after Farewell, is the story of how the most destructive weapon of the entire Cold War wasn't a missile. It was a few altered lines of code, and the trust that died when someone finally read them. Was this the most psychologically devastating operation in Cold War history? Drop your answer in the comments. I read every single one. Hit subscribe. Stay paranoid. I'll see you in the next one.